Hey guys, another video for our crime and emergency services in Japan playlist, and maybe also our odd stuff in Japan playlist. Just want to start clarifying right from the start, this thing we're about to talk about is not a trend as we often see on the internet and on television. Things are reported as trends that are not trends. This is just an odd, unusual thing. That's all it is. It's not a trend. Nobody's doing it. It's just a thing. It's just an odd thing, okay? Random odd thing. So what's happening is a printing company in Nagoya in Aichi has been trying to sell, or has started talking about selling, a stamp that's about 12 mil across. So it's sort of like a big version of a Japanese hanko that people use to stamp things, stamp their seal on things. So they're marketing, or they're going to market, or they're talking about marketing this thing as it's got a stamp of a hand, basically. Actually, have a look at this. Look at this. Look at this image. Okay, so there, as you can see, it's a stamp of a hand, and it's done with invisible ink that is only visible under black light. And so what these guys are talking about is selling the stamp with the invisible ink and a black light as a set for about $30. And their idea is that ladies will carry this stamp around with them. They give them a cord, they can wear it around their neck, or they can put it in their bag or whatever. And when they're on the train, if they're getting groped by some gropey dude, they can stamp him on the hand with this stamp, and that will mark him so that what? So that what? From a law enforcement point of view, right, all that's going to show is that guy was where that lady was, isn't it? That's all it's going to show. That's from a law enforcement point of view. That's all that will prove. That guy and that girl were in the same place at some time, and she stamped him on the hand with the stamp. A defense lawyer would probably just say, yeah, he was standing on the train and suddenly he felt this thing on his hand and he didn't think much of it, but it must have been her stamping him on the hand randomly for no apparent reason. So obviously, from a legal point of view, a law enforcement point of view, it doesn't prove anything, and it doesn't really help at all. And from a practical point of view, can you imagine it? The girl's on the train, lady's on the train, she feels a hand touching her, so she goes through her bag, finds the stamp at the bottom of the bag, pulls it out, pokes him on the hand with it, and then what? Then what? Gets off the train and tells the station guards or something, and they call the police and look for him and find him. And the black light that she has, or the black light the police might have, proves that the guy has a stamp on his hand. So it's a bit hard from a law enforcement point of view. It's a little bit hard to see there being much benefit in it. And chances are that we won't hear about this again. We heard about it once, and chances are we won't hear about it again, because quite often with these things, it's sort of like, often it might be genuinely that company thinks it's a worthwhile product, and they might think they can sell lots of them and make lots of money. It's possible, but more often than not, it's sort of like those cars that you see at car shows that are really far out and that aren't ever going to be built, but they're really just to attract attention to the company, aren't they? And often with stuff like this in Japan, we can't help but think that that's the motivation, that it's just to draw attention to that company, basically, because it's hard to imagine that it's going to get picked up on, you know. So chances are we won't hear about it again, or we might, you know. Things like this sometimes get picked up. If we do hear about it again, it's usually, Japanese television doesn't usually do the odd stuff as much as Western media does. So if Japanese TV does pick up on it, they're likely to treat it just as an odd thing as well. That, you know, and they'll sit around, and a group of them will sit around and talk about it, and you know, maybe we'll see that on Japanese TV. Usually the odd stuff, it's more likely to be picked up by the Western media and blown up, you know. If we saw this reported by someone on the internet, you know, or Western media, they'd go on about groping being a huge problem in Japan, and the latest solution, the latest trend to try and fight back against the incredible amount of groping that goes on in Japan is this stamp, right? So, which again would be based on fact, but would be exaggerated and inaccurate, wouldn't it? Because it's not a trend. We don't even know if it's been made yet. I mean, there was the one that we saw in the story was actually the image on the hand. We didn't actually see any of the rest of the stuff. So, who knows? But it's sort of interesting for a number of reasons. One is, quite often we see, in Japan, we see solutions to crime being really odd, impractical, probably ineffective solutions to crime that we see in Japan. Some of you might remember the orange dye balls that are common in convenience stores and post offices and places like that. And the idea is that if there's a robbery, that the staff should pick up these little plastic balls and throw them at the robber. And when they hit the robber, that they burst and cover him with dye, right? Which you want to hope he's not pointing a gun at you when you do it, or he gets pissed off and comes back and gives you a beating for it. We made a video about that. If you haven't seen it, it's on the Crime and Emergency Services playlist. Some of you might also remember the other solution, alleged solution to the groping problem, was one we showed you earlier, which was an electronic device that had a couple of buttons on it. And one button, you push the button and it says, "Stop groping me and leave me alone," or something similar to that. And another button on it that said, "Please help me, I'm being groped." Right, so you can see the common thread to these things is they are gadget or thing related solutions to human problems. And we see this in Japan all the time. If we step outside crime for a moment, another example would be the translators, you know, and the English learning systems, the electronic English learning systems, and we're seeing that all the time. You know, they talk about the low English abilities in Japan. I mean, it's really low. You know, when they rank all the countries on their English abilities, Japan's really, really low. It's below South Korea and most of Southeast Asia, and it's really, really low. And the Japanese government talk about it now and again, you know, and they say, "Oh, we need to improve our English." And the plan was they were going to all improve their English before 2020. We've only got, so for the Olympics, right? That was the goal. Let's improve. Some of you might remember we talked about this in a video about 4 or 5 years ago. Let's improve our English and make us all English competent before 2020 was the goal. We only got 12 months left and the English level hasn't improved. Strangely, talking about it didn't fix it. Talking about it and not changing anything didn't actually fix the problem. And that's what we see here all the time, you know. And so what's happened is there's been a lot of talk about English and how English is important. And so the solutions that we see are lots of electronic stuff. So the little handheld translators. Actually, a guy I'm going to be seeing later on today showed me one last time I saw him and said, "Oh, I'm traveling." He was going to go to somewhere, traveling to some other country, and he bought this translator for about $500. And he said, "What do you think of this?" And I said, "Oh, I don't know, let's have a look at it." So he showed it to me, and I spoke to it in English, and it has a light thing on it that says it understands or it doesn't, and it didn't understand. So I tried again, and it didn't understand, and then I tried an American accent. "Hey, Bob." And it didn't understand, and pretty well didn't understand anything, right? So the answer to the question was, well, I think it's probably not going to do you a lot of good by the look of it. And then he did the reverse too. He spoke into it in Japanese and tried to make it speak English, and the results were pretty sad too. So, but they, you know, this is what they try. They're always trying to find a device solution instead of the human solution. You know, another one is the kids learning English thing. We're seeing on TV all the time. Really cringy commercials on TV for these English learning systems for kids. They buy this device and it teaches them to speak fluently like a native speaker, they say. Pera is the word Japanese people use for fluent, you know. And oh, soon your children, if you buy this device for, you know, $1,000, soon your children will be pera in English, you know. And it's really cringy. You listen to what it is, and it's basically just sitting and repeating what they're hearing, you know. Listen to this, watch this image, and repeat it and repeat it and repeat it, which obviously is not going to work. You know, if electronic solutions like that were the solution, that's what everybody would be using, wouldn't it? But they just don't. They often don't want to address the human solution, you know. And we see this all the time. So instead of looking at the countries, you know, the top of the list of the people who can speak English well, the non-native English speakers, are usually the people in Northern Europe, you know, our Swedish friends and our Norwegian friends and, you know, Dutch friends and German friends, and, you know, European people quite often have a very good level of English, you know, and it's because they use it for communication, and there's all the reasons that, you know, they treat it as a communication thing instead of a memorization thing. And they practice it and they use it and they're very good at it. So, you know, instead of looking at that and saying, okay, well, let's look at the countries that are really good at speaking English as a second language, let's look at how they approach it and learning from them. Instead of that, they try and find the gadget that's going to fix it for them, you know. And the same with the groping thing. You know, the groping things, it's probably not as huge. There's a certain number of convictions a year, and of course there's probably 10 times or 100 times as many offences that take place that aren't reported, you know, and that's definitely, you know, definitely believable, that's definitely the case. It's the nature of Japanese society. We made a video about this a while ago, you know, the nature of Japanese society, that men are sort of dominant in Japanese society. People are really shy. And the train, you know, everyone stands on the train really quietly and stares at their smartphone. And for someone to suddenly say, "Hey, take your hands off me," you know, to imagine a young lady doing that because she's being touched by an old guy it is hard to imagine. And that's why they tried to do that electronic thing, push the button and it says, "Take your hands off me." But the lady that's too shy to say it out loud is also going to be too shy to push that button. Obviously, because it's the same reaction. Everyone's going to look. Everyone's going to look and say what's happening, and you know, it's going to be a big scene. And Japanese people are all about not creating a scene. So, you know, these are the problems. We made a whole video about this once before, about the groping on the trains thing, and it's the Japanese societal issues that contribute to making that a problem. You know, the fact that, you know, a lot of Japanese guys see ladies as objects. You know, a lot of men and women in Japan see as men as having the power and ladies not having the power. Ladies being assertive is not a thing that's encouraged here. You know, we had a young lady in our family once recently say that she didn't want to do something that was a bit, I can't remember what it was now, but something that was a bit assertive, and she didn't want to do it because she didn't think it was a cute thing to do. And that's, you know, Japanese society has this obsession about girls and ladies being cute. You know, and ladies of 40, you know, girls of 4 and ladies of 40 and everybody in between trying to be cute, you know, and being an assertive woman is not considered to be cute. Creating a scene in a public place is not considered to be a cool thing to do, whether you're male or female. And so when you look at all these aspects of Japanese society, it's easy to understand how a problem like that can develop. And it's not, the other thing too, it's not that all Japanese men are running around groping women. That's not the case. A lot of young Japanese guys are super shy themselves and wouldn't ever think of touching a woman under any circumstances. You know, it's only a certain small percentage of the devos that are doing that behaviour. But the reason that they're doing it and getting away with it often is because of all those aspects of Japanese society. So, you know, obviously the solutions to all these problems, the solution to the improving the English ability, and the solutions to the groping problem and everything else, obviously all people related, right? It's obviously, you know, you're not going to solve any of this stuff with a device or a stamp or any of these other things that they come up with, you know. And it's sort of it's constant. You know, we've mentioned lots of these on previous videos. You know, constant obsession with trying to find the easy way to, not the easy way, but a way that will solve the problem without people having to change anything about themselves or about society or about anything else, you know. And obviously, you know, the way to fix the English problem is they need to overhaul the way it's taught. and the way it's treated, and start treating it like a language instead of like something to memorise. They hand the kids these books, you know, that have just basically a dictionary, a dictionary with fewer words and a few more descriptions, and say, take this and memorise this, and then they give them a test to see how much of it they can remember. And obviously, you know, that would be part of learning a language, wouldn't it? But here it's pretty much, you know, 90% of it. And they teach them all the grammar rules and expect them to remember all that. And that's it. And, you know, even the kids here that get the best scores in English can't talk to you. And we've shown you that in videos before too. You know, hello, how are you? I'm fine, thank you. And you? Are you having a nice day? Etto dandake. So, you know, and again, it's not the kids' fault, it's not the students' fault, it's the system. The system's rubbish for teaching English. It's just rubbish, you know. If you talk to any of the people here that teach English in schools or in private schools or wherever, they'll tell you, you know, that the kids, that's rubbish, you know, the system's rubbish. The students are good and the students work hard and study hard and everything, but the system for teaching English is rubbish. And then as far as the groping thing's concerned, I mean, that, you know, where would you start with that? That's a huge thing. You know, you'd have to start with a campaign first of all, you know, television campaign, and get people talking about it, and you know, create a negative image about those guys that do it. I mean, there already is, you know, There's words for the guys that do that behaviour, and they are looked down on, and, you know, because Japanese people have, if they're not girls themselves, they have girls and ladies in their family that they don't want groped on the train. So already there's a public image about those guys, but they just need to step it up a bit and you know, show a few examples of ladies on the train standing up and saying, you know, don't touch me, and then the other passengers on the train, you know, talking to the guy or calling the police or something, and some sort of campaign like that, keeping in mind their social style. You know, it's always difficult when you see Westerners trying to propose solutions to Japanese problems. You know, remember the Cove movie about the people in Taiji killing the dolphins, you know, and those guys came here from the States and made the movie about the Cove, and, you know, they were activists trying to stop the dolphin killing. And as we said at the time, that movie was going to have the opposite effect, and it did, because it was made without considering the way Japanese people think. The Japanese people just thought that those guys that made that documentary were rude, badly behaved guests, basically coming to Japan and telling people what to do in a really rude way, and they had no respect for them at all, and it didn't change anything, you know. And that's the thing, the Westerners, and whenever we make these videos, there's always people, non-Japanese people, you know, saying what Japanese people should do about these things, and that's fair enough. Everybody's entitled to an opinion, but quite often the opinions that people have might work in their country but wouldn't work in this country. So it would have to be approached from you'd have to be fairly straightforward about it, but you'd have to do it in a way that Japanese people would relate to. You know, that this person has no respect and has no dignity and is a badly behaved person, and that, you know, good people in society have to draw attention to that and stop it happening and protect our ladies and our girls from this bad behaviour. And it's a crime, and show the dudes being arrested and taken away. I mean, you can do it with actors, but just that imagery of that person being a bad lowlife, and the police getting him and taking him away, and, you know, people standing up and say, hey, leave her alone, and that imagery, you know. The white knight hero thing, actually we've got to make a video one day. We had a white knight contact us recently telling us what a hero he was, but that white knight hero thing is popular in some countries and it's not popular in Japan. You know, the image of the one guy saving the day, you know, the Bruce Willis Die Hard white knight guy who saves the day. That image isn't sort of popular here because it's nobody wants to stand out. So, you know, again, that's a different cultural thing. What you'd need is the girl to say, imagine the advertisement, you know, the girl sitting on the train, suddenly she says, or standing on a busy train, suddenly she says, hey, don't touch me. And then a bunch of people all together around all say, hey, what's happening? You know, what's going on? Or a group of them, not just one. and then the next scene would be the guy's going off the train and the police are there waiting for him, and they arrest him and take him away in the back of the car. And you could probably throw a couple of media people standing there taking photos of him and the flashes going off and stuff too, because that sort of stuff. See, that's that social pressure. You know, in some countries, you know, getting arrested and taken away doesn't make, you know, some people wouldn't bother some people at all. You know, whereas here, you know, you get some, because most of these dudes that are doing this stuff are, you know, businessmen travelling to and from work on the train. And, you know, they've got a family at home and they've got a company they work for. Actually, that's a really good point too. You'd also show him losing his job and his family all being disgusted in him and him losing his job and all his co-workers going, oh dear. That'd be really powerful. That'd be really powerful in Japan because that happens. You know, if you have a drink driving conviction, even if you don't drive a car in your job, you work for an accountant's office somewhere, and you get a drink driving conviction, you can well lose your job. And that would be a very likely outcome. If someone was arrested for touching girls on the train, pretty much any company that he worked for would be likely to fire him for it. See, there's a cultural difference as well, you know. So that would be effective. The combination of those things, the big scene on the train with him being in the centre, the police taking him away, the media taking photos, his whole family being disgusted by his behaviour, and then his co-workers and his boss being totally disgusted, and then him losing his job and not being able to get another job. And all that is a very real possibility in Japan, very likely. And that's why that sort of imagery would really work, because these sort of middle-aged business guys who are doing that stuff would all look at that and go, oh geez, and it would make them think twice about doing it again. The other thing is that would encourage the ladies who it's happening to speak up. It would encourage the other people on the train to keep an eye out for it, because you can imagine that quite often when this stuff's happening, there would be other people seeing it and just not wanting to make a scene, not wanting to make a problem, and not doing it. You know, one thing about changing stuff in Japan and changing attitudes towards things in Japan is very difficult. You know, there's a real inertia here when it comes to change. But one thing about it is, once you start a trend, you know, it'll just go off. Once you make something common, you know, that's why people pick up on, you know, the whole smartphone thing. And then recently, we showed you the tapioca recently, or the tapioca trend. That's just become ridiculous. Even since we made that video, it's became bigger. So already the tapioca was everywhere, right? Everywhere we went, they're putting tapioca in all the drinks. Since we made that video, it's more common. Everywhere we go, the tapioca thing, and it's sort of part of the Japanese thing. There's an inertia against change, that, you know, everybody likes things just the way they are, and most people don't want change. But once something becomes a thing and that everybody's doing it, these guys jump on it. And you see that all the time here. Things, fashion's one. You know, one person wears, you know, you see, first one day you see one person wearing something, and suddenly everybody's doing it. And talking about, they talk stuff to death. We talked about that on a recent video. You know, there doesn't tend to be a lot of action, but there's a lot of discussion, you know, and these TV shows that, I was talking to one of the guys on Patreon about this recently, exchanging some messages with him, and he was talking about Japanese TV, and I said, you know, most Japanese TV, when you first come here, it's sort of interesting, and then it soon wears off, and then you just get sick of it, and you don't want to know about it. But there's a lot of this talking stuff to death. You know, they talk and talk and talk, and recently we had that road rage thing, you know, and they're still talking about it. And they have their panels, and usually the panels are made up of people with no knowledge of the topic at all, who just all go, oh, and then a few sensei, you know, a few sort of people that are experts in the field, and everybody, you know, these big panels of people. And again, one person won't stand up. It's a panel of teachers, a panel of people with experience, and a panel of other people with no idea. And, you know, everybody's talking about it again and again and again. And that's what this would work. If you did that campaign against the groping thing, That's what would happen. If you drew attention to it, they'd start talking about it and it would go everywhere. And they would be talking about it for weeks on end, and it probably would make a bit of a difference. But see, they don't sort of go that way. It's all too hard. Let's just make a couple of devices and a stamp and see if that fixes it. And of course, if that worked, people in other countries would do that already, wouldn't they? But it doesn't work, does it? It's people. If it's about people, it requires a people change, doesn't it? You know, not a device or a gadget. So, and we see this is not just the English and the groping, it's across the board in Japan. That's what it's like here all the time, you know. Anyway, there it was. We're out of time. Time to go inside and have a tapioca tea. More videos coming soon.